Anytime you're digesting, technically you're using parasympathetic. But if you're constantly having gut issues, you're probably not getting into that parasympathetic very well.
Dr. Jaban Moore is a doctor of chiropractic located in Kansas City who works virtually with clients through functional medicine to assist them in overcoming chronic health conditions. At age 25, he went from being an award-winning college athlete to not being able to get out of bed. He sought out countless doctors looking for answers, but doctors only gave him Band-Aid solutions. He was later diagnosed with Lyme disease. Once he overcame this complex infection, he dedicated his practice to helping clients discover the causes of their symptoms. Dr. Moore specializes in Lyme disease, PANS/PANDAS, autism, parasitic infections, and environmental toxicities. Dr. Moore has over 200,000 followers on his Instagram channel, and his team at the Redefining Wellness Center see clients virtually.
Red light is a game changer in my life for biohacking my body. Another thing that I love doing is...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Welcome to the next talk on the Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity Live Beyond the Norms Health Summit. Today, we are going to talk about nervous system regulation. This may not be an obvious subject for a longevity summit, but an article in Nature magazine shows that it is important for longevity. In this case, by genetically manipulating test subjects, it was C. elegans in this case, they either upregulated or downregulated neural excitation. And it turns out that the downregulated neural excitation that they did extended the lifespan of the test subjects. This is not to mention how bad we feel and the negative impacts on our health of being in an excited sympathetic state versus a calm parasympathetic state. Our next speaker is going to guide us in the direction of a calm state where we not only feel better, but we not only feel better, but as it turns out, we actually live longer. Dr. Jaban Moore is a doctor of chiropractic located in Kansas City who works virtually with clients through functional medicine to assist them in overcoming chronic health conditions. At age 25, he went from being an award-winning college athlete to not being able to get out of bed. He sought out countless doctors looking for answers, but doctors only gave him Band-Aid solutions. He was later diagnosed with Lyme disease. Once he overcame this complex infection, he dedicated his practice to helping clients discover the causes of their symptoms. Dr. Moore specializes in Lyme disease, PANS/PANDAS, autism, parasitic infections, and environmental toxicities. Dr. Moore has over 200,000 followers on his Instagram channel, and his team at the Redefining Wellness Center see clients virtually. Dr. Moore, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me, and a great introduction there.
Thank you. Stumbled over a few words. So first I have to ask, what was your sport? Like, what was it that you were into, award winning? Like, what were you dominating at?
I was actually a shot putter in track and field. And I also threw hammer in college. And the fun fact for me is I'm 5'10", and I was only about 200 pounds. So I was not the size that you would typically think of for a collegiate shot putter.
That's okay. So that's awesome. And then this all happened when you were already in school for becoming a chiropractor, right? Like the Lyme disease.
It did-ish, right? So I was in undergrad and then in my master's program when I was at Central Missouri throwing shot put. And out of high school, I was back squatting 690 pounds. I had a 36-inch vertical back in high school, got to college, and I was making really great gains, feeling like I was invincible, like all 19-year-old boys feel. And then I moved into a very, very moldy basement. Had no idea this was a problem. Strength started to plateau, started getting tired, started getting achy, started having issues walking up and down the stairs. And then by the time I got to chiro school, lost the weight that I had gained to be an athlete, it just felt like the floor fell out from under me and my body just wasn't operating normally. And by the way, I went from being 247 pounds overweight on purpose, just this big guy, to being 185 pounds with abs. And that's when I felt my worst. So you don't necessarily have to look sick to feel sick, but that's just the beginning of the story of, if your body, if you're suppressed by Lyme or mold or parasites, you're going to start to feel like you age extremely rapidly and just not feel well at all.
So what drew you initially to chiropractic studies?
So being an athlete, I always went to different professionals for help to just keep me on the field, right? So I initially, as a freshman in high school, went to an orthopedic surgeon when I dislocated my kneecap. And at the time, I had wanted to be a doctor my whole life since I was 5 years old. So I thought, I love sports. I want to be a doctor, sports medicine. So that was my first interaction with an actual sports medicine doctor, not just watching them on TV when they're with athletes on the field. And I kind of realized as I was sitting in the waiting room, I go, man, this guy's kind of at the end of people's careers for a lot of athletes if he's repairing an ACL, Achilles, etc. So as I got older into high school and into college, I'm like, who do I go to keep me functioning, to keep me on the field, to keep me feeling good? I was like, it's not an orthopedic surgeon, it's a chiropractor. That's who I go to when something happens and I want to stay on the field. So that's really what drove me into chiropractic, was the more natural, in the moment, effective type of therapy to keep me going versus, probably end my season, if not my career, with a surgery.
So you wanted to be more part of the solution before the problem occurred, right? Like
Exactly.
Let's nip this at the bud. I think that's awesome. So tell us a little bit more, right? So you're this athlete, you're at 240, you're dropping down to 150, you're looking fit but not feeling fine, right? What you start going to doctors, they're not really what was that experience like?
Yeah. So, I'm in chiropractic school, so I have access to a lot of docs. I'm going to conferences, functional medicine conferences that are all of the professions in one place, just learning about functional medicine, which is both natural and more alternative, contemporary, Western, all of it combined together, just looking for the best results. And as I'm starting to feel bad, as I'm ending up with hormonal dysfunction and pain and brain fog, I'm asking around, and chiropractors were adjusting me and acupuncturists were doing acupuncture. Nutritional people were giving me supplements. Medical doctors were offering different medications. And I was just like, all right, guys, great. I've tried all this stuff. No one's talking about why this is happening. They're just talking about that it is happening, and here's your Band-Aids. So what's going on? And people are just like, well, we don't know. We're not seeing anything. The labs aren't showing. And then one guy in a conference just goes, well, have you ever thought about Lyme disease? And I was like, nope, tell me more. Because I was open for anything at this point. Because I've talked to all sorts of docs everywhere, but done all kinds of things. And he's like, well, I don't really know much, but I heard about it at one conference one time. There's this guy in Wisconsin that it's a specialty. I was like, great. Okay. So I scheduled and I went up there. He's like, sure enough, you got Lyme disease. He gave me herbs, did frequency specific technique, and gave me a few different other nutrient changes to my body. And within a few weeks, I started noticing changes physiologically. And I mentioned I had hormonal issues. Like I had developed erectile dysfunction at 25 years old. And I was able to start having proper hormonal function after a few weeks. I could feel a change. It took a lot longer than that, but I could feel changes coming back into my body. And I don't know about you, but as a 25-year-old male, not having normal function was devastating. And it felt like a lifetime trap of, am I going to have a family? Am I going to be able to perform as a man? And over time, with the care from Dr. Lindsley in Wisconsin, looking for a actual cause to a physiological problem, removing the cause made sense to me, and it worked.
So you have this devastating experience, and then you're going to doctors, and they're like, "Well, let's put a Band-Aid on top of this symptom, and let's put a Band-Aid on top of that symptom," and nobody really is addressing it until finally you get somebody who says, like, "Look into Lyme disease." That must have been such an amazing sense of relief. Probably continues to motivate you in what you do today, right? I would imagine like your sense of relief in that moment is what drives you to deliver value to your current clients and current patients and all of that.
Oh, absolutely. And it actually wasn't at first a good feeling because, like I said, they're like, oh, look at Lyme disease, but they knew nothing because it wasn't a popular topic. It wasn't something people knew much about. So then it was just like, oh, another dead end until finally I got to Wisconsin. And Dr. Lindsay was like, yeah, so this is causing this. Here's a physiological change. You could look at these labs and here's a solution I think may help you. And like I said, there we go. And then that does drive me so much because one of my goals right now is to continue to grow my ability to reach people and educate. And right now we have like 600,000 contacts between socials and emails and everything. And my goal is just to give people the option. Educate people and give them the option to make a choice to have the freedom of health, right? So if you're dealing with MS, there's studies that show that in autopsies, in one study, there was an autopsy study done, and 100% of those brains of MS clients, there were nematode parasites. 25% of those brains, they found Borrelia burgdorferi, which is Lyme disease, right? So when you start finding studies like this, just saying that out loud on a summit, a podcast, telling people there is a chance that you're dealing with other things. So there's a chance that you can get well. So to give them the opportunity to feel better, that is the goal.
Well, I'll be talking with you after because my brother has MS and he's actually much smarter than me. Don't ever tell him that, by the way. Like, don't ever tell him that, but is probably kind of dug into this research. So I'll probably have a conversation with you afterwards. All right. So I looked on your website. You've helped so many people with serious chronic illnesses. And today we're going to talk about the nervous system. So I was trying to put this together. It's kind of you suggested this topic. And I was like, so it must be that the nervous system is some sort of maybe odd piece to the puzzle when you're talking about chronic illnesses. Why is that?
So it's exactly what you're saying. People think of it as the odd piece. However, what is the nervous system? It helps to regulate your immune system. You need your immune system if you're dealing with a chronic infection. It helps to regulate digestion, detoxification, and every other function within the body. And the problem is, and I'm that guy, like when I was going through school, I was a personal trainer and I was hanging out with the plumbers and the electricians and the concrete guys. My dad's a concrete guy. So that's who I was talking to going through school. So I refused to learn how to speak in Latin like a doctor usually does. And I decided I wanted to speak lay. So that's how I'm going to speak. And I use analogies, right? So if you're running from a tiger, the only thing you care about is taking the next step. That's it. One more step, one more step, one more step, because you're trying to get away. When you're stuck in fight or flight, which means that your body feels unsafe all the time for whatever reason, it is trying to keep up with whatever's happening in your life, whether you live in mold, you've had abuse, physically, emotionally, mentally, you work way too much, you don't eat enough, you have parasites or Lyme disease. If you're stuck in fight or flight and you're running from this tiger, which tiger to me means stressor, the first thing I've got to get you to do is to calm down that fight or flight so that you can get out of sympathetic and back into more of a parasympathetic body posture. And people argue you can be in both at the same time. I'm like, sure. But when you're running, you're not worried so much about rest, digest, recovery, relaxation. You are worried about the next step. And when clients walk into my office, sometimes their shoulders are up to their ears, they're uptight, they're in fear where they don't move forward, so they're frozen. They are anxious and depressed, so they don't have the motivation to move forward in their care plan. And by the way, it takes a ton of energy to be afraid and anxious. And that energy is taking away from your ability to do other processes like think clearly, make decisions, critically think, to take the supplements you need to do, exercise, put the red light on you, all the biohacking things that you need for longevity. When you're stuck in fight or flight, they are not important to you because you just simply want to get through the next moment.
Yeah. So that lays out a good case. So this is a debilitating situation. I wanted to ask, you said that you can be in both the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Are people arguing that there's any value in that? Because my first thought is, well, let's get rid of the sympathetic because that's agitated, and it doesn't sound good to me. But do people try and make the argument that it's good to be in both?
I think the concept is we used to say you are either in fight or flight or you're in rest and digest. So you're in sympathetic or you're in parasympathetic. And I think what we're really finding now is your body oscillates back and forth, but you can be dominant on one side of things. So anytime you're digesting, technically you're using parasympathetic. But if you're constantly having gut issues and poor digestion and poor peristalsis, so movement of the gut, you're probably not getting into that parasympathetic very well. You're not staying there very well. Maybe you're not even digesting your food very well, so it's coming out undigested, which could suggest parasites or bacterial dysbiosis. Also can just suggest, you're not chewing your food well because you're in a rush to get to whatever's next coming along at you. So you might be leaning toward one side or the other versus being able to interchange between them throughout the day as necessary. I mean, we do move back and forth, but if you're not moving back and forth well, then this is where it becomes a problem, because you'll see people coming in where in a hair tissue mineral analysis, you see low electrolytes in their body. So low sodium and potassium, for instance. So when you stand up, you get lightheaded. You don't feel like you can do work for very long because muscular wise, you just run out of energy. You can't think clearly for very long. So you're sitting there and you have a 5-minute window to do something difficult with your mind. And then it just starts getting really brain foggy. So a lot of my clients deal with this. And when you run that hair test, you see them very depleted. Well, you're depleted because your body's probably burned through the electrolytes. When you're stressed out all the time, you release hormones such as antidiuretic hormone, cortisol. So all these adrenal type hormones that actually cause your body to use minerals quickly, urinate more often, and then you deplete. So I'm looking at, say, the blood test albumin. Is your albumin elevated, which could suggest dehydration? If so, let me run a hormone panel and see if your adrenal hormones are up. This tells me maybe we need to be working a little bit on calming and cutting things out of our lives that are not benefiting us right now in the healing journey.
And that's obviously a kind of a coaching exercise, right? This isn't, you're not going and spending 15 minutes with your healthcare practitioner and they're going, I've looked at these things and here, let's run through some ways that you can get into your parasympathetic state. What do you typically, what are the most frequent challenges that people are facing that agitate the nervous system?
Oh man. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a new client visit with me, right? Because this will let people see what they're going to experience when I'm going through the list. So the first thing is, do you live in a safe place? Is the air you breathe clean? So does it have mold toxicity or a bunch of nasty chemicals in the air that you're breathing? So we can test your home if we need to. Are you drinking clean water, eating clean food, and using non-toxic cleaners and hygiene in your home so that we make sure that you're not retoxing, meaning getting more toxins into your body as we go through and detox your body, if that's what we found in your labs. So there are other places that you can look is dental issues. So do you have mercury fillings in your mouth? That's a big problem. Do you have root canals that have cavitations below it where there's organisms growing and releasing toxins into the nerve canals in your mouth? So this is another big problem. And then implants, right? So breast implants can be a really big problem because they can become infected with mold and yeast and bacteria if they have a hole in them, or maybe they're leaking out silicone into your body, which is another toxin that you have to deal with. From there, I go, okay, so if we've gone through step one, which is the safe environment, the safe place, and we've got that safe, do you feel safe in your body, or are you still dealing with anxiety and irritability? Are you still dealing with this fear state? And if so, then you don't feel safe. And if you're not feeling safe, then we need to do brain work. So I look at primal trust, neurofeedback, talking to a therapist, doing EMDR, these types of different cares that can help. Maybe it's not with me because I'm not a therapist, but I'm looking at the big picture, the whole picture for a person and going, okay, the environment, now the mental health aspect. And then from there, I look at, okay, so your body, whereas I've ran labs, we looked at a total toxin panel, we've looked at blood panels, we looked at hair and urine. Do we have parasites, bacteria, mycoplasma, funguses, viruses, radioactive elements, heavy metals, or other organic toxins that you're dealing with that could be suppressing your mitochondria, aging your body, damaging your tissue, leading to a stressed system, because all of the things that I just mentioned to you fall into, for me, a category of stressors. Your body can only handle so much stress. When that stress is too great, you start to break down and don't function well.
Okay, so you covered a lot there, right? So one is the environment, kind of rolling into some dental implants or maybe even breast implants, and then really kind of fear, emotional stressors that could be addressed with a therapist or EMDR. And you covered this already. What are the daily habits that one can do to in their lives to really calm down their nervous system? So you may be giving some, prescriptions, and those prescriptions might be like, here, you need to go home and do this.
Yeah. I had one lady who, she had like 7 kids. She's super busy. She's also corporate America. And all day she's just go, go, go. Her boss literally has her phone number and she does everything for him. So she's on call 24/7.
Wow.
And I just told her, I go, that's not healthy to constantly be at the beck and call of your boss, your 3 children, and her husband, who's an amazing guy, really didn't ask much of her, but also she's there for her husband when needed. Even though he's super supportive. And I felt like he was like holding her together to some degree. My prescription to her was so simple. Leave your phone on the desk, go outside and stare at a tree for 20 minutes. Just separate and calm down. Now, that seems so simple, right? And we can get into things that you've probably heard in this longevity summit that are also incredible, like get out in the sun, do red light therapy, add castor oil pack to your liver, which actually brings your body toward a more parasympathetic state. These are all amazing tools that you can do. And I just try to figure out what fits someone's life. But quiet time, I read a study a decade ago that said 1 single minute a day was actually more effective than 7 minutes once a week, right? So equivalent times, but it was separating. So I've talked to so many people. I'm like, you've got kids, a wife, a husband, whatever it is that you got going on. Can you go to the toilet and sit for 5 minutes, not with your phone scrolling, just be with yourself and your thoughts, but not let your thoughts run on all the things you haven't gotten done, but just try to have an empty mind and relax. And meditation or yoga or so many things have proven to increase longevity. Because remember, your body's listening. Your cells are listening. They need that time to rest. And just giving them minutes a day, if you can't give them 30 minutes or an hour a day, is still valuable.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, it reminds me, I saw a talk by Marshall Goldsmith, and he wrote a book. He's written a number of really popular books. One was What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I'm fortunate enough that some people I kind of surround myself with actually have direct access to him. So it's kind of cool. But one of the things in his talk, he coaches, most of the, Fortune 100 CEOs. And one of the first things he says he does is come in and I want you to be quiet. And I want you to count in your head from 1 to 10 without getting distracted. And most of them can't get past 3. right? Like that's how wired they are. And so that's one of the things you're talking about. Like just be quiet. And maybe that you probably do this, right? Like, hey, if you can't be quiet and you can't just think of nothing, count or do something and get better at it, because the brain is it's an interesting thing. I meditate probably 4 days a week in the morning. You really shooting for 5, and it's I'm still trying to deal with issues that I'm got to face in the day. I'm like, no, now's not the time. Like, it's back. Let's get focused. It can be really challenging.
So I take so much back to your body only can produce so much energy in a day. No matter what you're doing, you let's just say your threshold is 100 units of energy. That's not a real thing, but 100 units of energy. If you're expending 50 of them by stressing, worried, anxious, fear, whatever it is that you're doing that's not building you, that's not actually getting things done, then you only have 50 units of energy to do the rest. And most of us that, at least that are coming to my client, like coming in to work with me, most have burned through all that every single day. They have no left, and their skin looks older. Their hair is graying. They're not able to work out. They can't recover from their gym workouts. So I just tell people all the time, I go, if we can get back some of those units of energy, and I'm doing testing and checking mitochondria and looking at nutrients and figuring all of this out. But if we can get some of those units of energy back that you're using on, let's just say, non-valuable mental energy, then I can shift that into healing. And then I even go a step further. I go, for many people, you're taking 50 supplements because one doctor or one podcast or one thing said, hey, take all these things. I go, how much energy does it take you to remember them, get them all out, put them inside your mouth, swallow them, your digestive tract to open up the capsules, also to figure out where all of that stuff goes, do you need it or not, process it and filter it through the liver and the kidneys, and then you have really expensive urine. So why don't we think about this from a very detailed perspective and do exactly what your body needs? And then once we get all the way to well, let's pick out just a few things that are really helpful for you, that are going to keep you well long-term, and be particular with how that is, because if you have a healthy diet, you don't need 50 supplements. So figuring out that mix for people and what works for people actually increases the amount of free energy that we can use for our longevity to live a longer, healthier, happier, more energetic life.
Amen. So on your website, you mentioned mast cell activation syndrome. What is the connection, you think, between chronic illnesses like that, chronic fatigue syndrome? By the way, is that, I'm familiar with fibromyalgia. Is that kind of the same thing? And what is the link between those chronic illnesses and the nervous system in terms of health?
Well, let's just take a moment and say what these things are, right? Fibromyalgia means that you hurt and they don't know why. So they've done all these tests. You hurt and nobody can give you a real reason why you hurt. So it's like idiopathic, unknown pain. Chronic fatigue, you're tired and no one knows why. And I'll just throw another one out there. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. What does that mean? It means nothing. It means your stomach hurts. No one knows why. And then mast cell is a mast cell activation syndrome. Mast cells are an immune cell. And these people have overreactive immune systems where they're attacking. It could be a little bit or it could be everything. So some of the more severe cases are they attack everything, including sunlight, supplements, homeopathics, even all the way up to just opening their mouth and putting water in it. They start to have these reddened splotches, pain, spasms, headaches, reactions. Now, in lesser cases, you just start with a few food allergies, a little bit of splotchy redness, and it just increases over time. So all these conditions have in common a fairly unknown causation. And what it has to do with the nervous system is often it's a stress response from too many stressors. So in the case of fibromyalgia, oftentimes I'll see people that have lymph that is backed up. So their lymphatic drainage is backed up. Their muscles don't recover well. So their mitochondria can't produce enough energy, or their digestive tract can't absorb enough protein to get to the muscle tissue to repair it. So now you're sore all the time. The nerves in the brain may be irritated in say like the pain centers, the sensory centers of the brain. So you may have elevated inflammation in the brain, which you could test through a neural zoomer, which is a test for the brain and having immune antibodies to the brain. So you can test for that there. So those are some causations for fibromyalgia. For chronic fatigue, goes down a similar path. Is your body overwhelmed by too much where you don't have the energy to function at a normal capacity in the day-to-day life? And I'm looking at an organic acid test, looking at Krebs cycle, which is your energy system, or beta oxidation, which is the way you break down fat and make energy. So Krebs is more sugar carbs. And this is done in the mitochondria, which on this summit, I'm sure people have just gone all the way through mitochondria and talked so much about it. And it is vastly important. So you want to optimize energy production. And then when you get to mast cell, it's just, to me, it's like the deepest level of dysfunction. It's your body has gone into what's called a cell danger response. And in a cell danger response, your cells are going, is it time for me to have an auto destruct? Is it time to defend against everything? Is it time to just try to heal? So the body's really trying to figure out what to do. And it's in a very crucial, very reactive state. And this is where people end up getting to where they feel very trapped. They're down to 2 or 3, 5 foods at times. So, and it's caused by the body being so stressed, it does not have the time or energy to make a response individualized to different triggers. So it just responds negatively to everything.
So some of the stuff has kind of been circling back, which is there's potential mold toxicity probably can have an impact on each of those that we just talked about. Parasites could have an impact, and we're talking about nervous system. How do you really assess the nervous system, and what should you be looking for, or people be looking for?
All these things I've talked about today affect the body, and I keep calling them stressors, right? And there's no one test for nervous system that I can tell you, just go out and run this test and it's going to tell you your nervous system's tapped out. There's not something out there that I find to be 100% reliable. So you can do HRV, which is heart rate variability. And if your heart rate variability is very low, then your body is probably at a very high stress state, which I have one of those in my clinic. And I can use that to test people and go, okay, yeah, your heart rate variability is very low, and we need to start working on, usually those devices will say sleep, staying away from alcohol, not working out too hard because your recovery is poor. You can also do something called neurofeedback, which is where you can map a brain. And when you map a brain, this allows for you to see what brain waves are firing. And when your brain waves go really high, often your body's in a very stressed state. I'm looking at labs like albumin, where I mentioned earlier today on the summit. If albumin's elevated, I think you're likely dehydrated, because that's what research shows. Elevated albumin can be from dehydration. Well, then I look at a hair tissue mineral test, and if there's several markers on a hair test, and it's all about the relation between each other to get the information. If I see low macro minerals, which is sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, then your body's probably depleted, which means you've been in a stress state for a long period of time, and your body has just depleted itself of those minerals trying to get you stronger. If you have a high level of sodium and you're not supplementing in tablespoons of salt, then you're likely in an inflammatory stressed state. So that tells me that you haven't probably crashed yet, but you're going there. But if you have symptoms, just general symptoms of fatigue, brain fatigue, where you don't have the ability to think for very long, you feel dizzy or out of touch, you have diagnoses of even things like POTS, dysautonomia. These are all common pieces of the puzzle that make me think that your body is extremely stressed. If you're just a little stressed, you feel overwhelmed. You just feel like, a little burnt out. You want to go home, irritable. Maybe you don't feel quite like yourself. You have some anxiety building, some depression. Not saying that you're diagnosed as chronically depressed, but you just feel these things building. And that could mean to me that your nervous system is becoming a little dysregulated and we have some work to do.
So, all right. So we've identified the nervous system is dysregulated. And you've been kind of peppering some ideas. Give like a broad picture. Hey, I can tell your nervous system, your typical conditions are maybe overworked. I think just having 7 kids would have done it. Like you didn't even need to have a job in the example that you gave. Now what is the typical checklist that you're going through to really say, this is how we should address that nervous system issue?
So that list I gave earlier of safe place, feel safe, and then checking all of those different infections and toxins, that's kind of my playlist, right? Like I'm going to go down that. I'm going to check the box on each one. I create a roadmap out of that. So I literally put a roadmap in somebody's note and I'm like, okay, look, these are all the boxes that you checked yes to. So in order of the way I even explained it earlier, I'm going to go down that checklist and I'm going to go through one at a time, making sure that we can tolerate working on it and then recovering to the best of our ability. So if you're living in mold, get out of mold. If you're drinking tap water, quit. Start drinking clean water, which depending upon where you live could be reverse osmosis or distilled. It depends on what's in your water supply. If you're using junky hygiene products, or if you're working a job that's making you work 100 hours a week, or you hate your boss because they're belittling you, let's look at what we can do to get you out of those situations. Now, obviously, I'm not the one doing a lot of these things. Like if your boss is belittling you, I'm not going to go in and talk to them. Like you got to take a stance on your own. If you're living in a moldy house, you need to find an expert in inspecting and remediating in your home. But then as we go past that, it's like, okay, what other internal stressors? Because that's more where my game comes in and we run labs and we do that work. But if you live in mold and I find parasites and SIBO, we got to start with the fact that you live in mold. So that's why I gave that playlist earlier of like, here it is. Start going down the checklist and figuring out what we got to deal with. And that way we can take care of it. Because in my roadmap, I will tell people like, here's step 1. We're going to do this month. We're going to spend 30 to 60 days figuring out parasites. And then in the next 30 to 60 days, we're going to figure out gut bacteria. And then we're going to go and work in fungal infections, because that's the order I found to be the most accurate at getting long-term reproducible results.
One of the things that's clear is that some of this is going to be homework that they have to go home and do, right? Like they've got to have the conversation with their boss. They've got, can you maybe to help people who are experiencing these challenges and may not have the right mindset, what's the mindset of customers who have the best outcomes, right? As a contrast to the mindset of customers who don't have the best outcomes for what you walk them through.
Oh man, mindset is so important, because sometimes when the nervous system comes into play, people just don't want to hear it. They don't want to do the work on their brain. They'll take whatever supplement I offer. So many people are coming in that way. So immediately when I start talking to somebody in my very first visit, I'm going, are you perfectionist? Are you OCD? Are you willing to do this type of work? Are you anxious and afraid to get started? Are you willing to do what I call brain physical therapy, which, like I said, that may not be with my clinic. Like we'll give some handouts on vagus nerve work and some basics of some of these other tools, but I'm going to get you to a specialist in that. And when I get people to commit to, say, Primal Trust, which is an online membership, you can do it. I always tell people it's a 6-month commitment. It's not. It's 1 month that you pay for, but I need you to pay for probably 6 of them. And Primal Trust can be a game changer, because Kathleen King, who developed it, was a physical therapist in pain management. And she took the somatic therapy that they use in that, the limbic retraining and the vagal nerve exercises, put them together, created a mindset program that helps people to take back their brain so that they're able to be active and taking a very strong responsibility for their health. And when my clients come in and they're in panic and fear, I'm like, okay, here, we're going to do this first. We're going to build the right mindset that's going to get you out of running from the tiger. And then we're going to be able to step into the role of a partnership. I'm just here to lead you with the knowledge that I have. I am not going to make you well. I'm here to give you the experience that I have so that you can take those steps. So clients that work really well with me are ones that are willing to do that are willing to be coached and take that partnership and move forward, because there is no magic pill. There is no easy button when it comes to people that are in chronic illness.
Yeah. So I think the message to anybody who's having some chronic conditions is just know that there are solutions out there, right? And some of those solutions are going to require you to change, right? And that start getting your mindset ready for that, because that's probably the only thing that's sure, is that you want to solve these chronic problems. Is something's going to have to change. Environment, or if it's getting rid of the parasites, environment handling the mold. If it's your nervous system, then there are things that you're going to have to be hands on and take care of. Is there anything else? I'm kind of ready for some wrap up questions. Is there anything else related to kind of nervous system that we didn't cover that you want to kind of make sure you highlight?
I just want to highlight the fact that these conditions that we've talked about today, whether it be fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, mast cell, Lyme, mold, parasites, they're all just weights on your body that are holding you down, and they're all recoverable if you take the right steps with the right provider and do the work, because your body's meant to thrive and survive. And I know some of the questions that when we're on a summit about longevity, like why are we talking about chronic illness? It's because chronic illness is the absence of vitality, right? So when you can meet with somebody like myself who works with the most chronic, and you can see where there's an absence in vitality, and you start turning those switches, the same thing can be done with someone who is feeling good. And if you take somebody who's feeling good and you start turning those dials with the mitochondria and removing the toxins and maximizing mitochondria, now, we get into that optimal superhuman field. Because I know for myself, coming from mold and Lyme and then learning about all these tools and getting well, and shoot, I have a red light built into my shower. I have all sorts of meditation and neurofeedback in my clinic. I've got EMF blockers built in through my house. My bedroom doesn't have electrical sockets that turn on at night because I wanted to pull away all of the things that would slow me down. And now I feel energy 24/7. Going to bed is a choice now. Like I tell myself, for vitality, I need to go to bed for 8 hours because I just don't get tired anymore. So the message is, no matter how good you feel, figure out what dial to turn. You can keep getting better.
I like that. Keep moving it forward. All right, so here we go. These they can be rapid fire, or they can be longer answers. Do you have a target age that you want to live to?
My grandma's 96 and still kicking. Came over and held my little baby here the other day. So nice. I keep giving her a hard time. I'm like, are you going to make it to the triple digits here? And she's like, I don't know. Well, I want to beat whatever she does. So I'm hoping for like 105, 110.
All right. 100, 105 to 110. I like that. And do you think there's, or what do you think is the maximum age that humans can live to?
I don't know. I think somebody's lived to 120 or 130 in some of the most recent things that I've read. So I think that we can get to 130 or 40, but technology keeps coming out. I mean, we've harnessed the power of sunlight and put it in red lights, and we're harnessing, earth energy and putting it in things that can be frequency generated. And as long as we can learn to stay away from some of the nasty human inventions, say glyphosate, I think we can live a long time.
That's awesome. So what are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, that you would share that could help you with your longevity and to live a longer health span?
Oh man, I just gave one of them, red light in the shower. Holy heck. When I got my first red light, which if you don't know about red light technology, it's absolutely amazing. I put it on my knees, my beat up college knees from back squatting 690, and I couldn't squat. I could not squat but once a month as a 28-year-old. And now I'm squatting once or twice a week with weight because I'm doing red light every single night in the shower. So red light is a game changer in my life. for biohacking my body. Another thing that I love doing is something that's been more recent and way harder for me. It's the same advice I gave earlier, stare at a tree. So I do quiet time where I stop my brain from running, and I was ADHD as a kid. And now I'm spending at least 10 minutes every morning, no sound, no phone, no nothing, just letting my body get into sync, which it's been increasing my energy so much. And this is something that I resisted so hard knowing it was good for me, just didn't feel like me. So those are my two things that I do every single day that are super easy biohacks.
My son actually and daughter have ADHD, and so I drag them into my meditation sessions from time to time. And it is actually the first time I kind of forced him and her to do it. In my mind, I realized, a timeout is meditation was basically a timeout, right? Because and in fact, it was longer than their time frame, right? Is usually when we started it a couple times. So I'm glad I'm getting him in at least aware of it, like even if he doesn't like it at this point. All right, Jaban, how can people contact you?
So you can look me up on basically any platform. Instagram is the largest platform that we have right now. Dr. JabanCKC@gmail.com. So Dr. JabanCKC@gmail.com, or on Instagram. And that is the best way to contact us.
Okay. So it's, just to make sure that's Dr. Jaban CKC is how they would find you on Instagram.
Sorry, Dr. Jaban Moore. I said the wrong thing. Dr. Jaban Moore.
I thought that might have been the case, so I want to make sure. So Dr. Jaban Moore. All right. And one last thing. What in the near future are you excited about?
Near future, what am I excited about? Getting the cold plunge put into my house.
Oh, yeah. I actually have the tube for a cold plunge. We do have a lab, so I actually have a chiller here. But the showers in Houston just got cold enough that I'm like, I might be good through the winter. But we'll see. I'm excited about that also. All right. So you can find him at Dr. Jaban Moore. That's DrJabanMoore. That's on Instagram. What's your website? What's the website they could contact you?
drjabanmoore.com.
Also, so drjabanmoore.com. You can visit his website. He's got access to education, live videos, and programs over there. Dr. Moore, I just want to thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.